Mrs. Clinton has said nothing to explain why she took the highly unusual step of completely bypassing government email while she was Secretary of State, instead running everything through a private server in her home.
All right, let's get to work. Our first guest is the senior congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner, David Drucker. And we're also joined by the senior policy analyst for the Independent Women's Forum, Hadley Heath Manning. Thank you both for joining us, and a good Monday.
Good to be here.
All right, let's get right to it. David, I'm going to come to you first. The Clinton camp issuing a clarification on these deleted emails. They say that every message was reviewed. Do you believe them?
Well, it's very possible that every message was reviewed, but who cares? The real point here is who reviewed them and who decided what was relevant to be sent to the State Department to be a part of the official government archive of information, and who decided that it was personal. That's something that the Clinton camp is going to have to answer, and they haven't answered it so far.
Is it pretty much a yawn inside the Beltway as this report comes out?
No, actually, this story has legs, a lot more legs than I would have thought. Like you, I sort of figured, all right, I mean, the Clintons are at it again. It's a long campaign. We're all going to yawn about this. But what has it been now, 10 days or something like that? And everybody is still asking questions. And I point out here that the real relevant issue, in my view, isn't a matter of transparency, although that is, of some interest. The real issue here that hasn't been answered is how secure was this server, who deemed it secure, and how do they know it wasn't hacked? The Secretary of State, as a senior member of the President's national security team and as the leader of a major government department, presumably trafficked in information, classified or otherwise, that our adversaries and enemies were very interested in. What did she do to make sure that it wasn't vulnerable to attack, given the fact that she was using her own server?
All right, Hadley Heath, to you. First of all, I'll get right back to that main question. All these about the emails, we read, we reviewed every one. And as you heard David said, that's not the big deal. But let me ask you, do you believe them? They read every email?
It's possible. I agree with David that every email was reviewed and was read. But again, that's not the issue. This scandal is going to fall in line in terms of the Clinton legacy. There's now a list of scandals going all the way back to when Bill Clinton was president. And unfortunately, Hillary and Bill will be tied together, and the Benghazi scandal, questions about donations to their foundation from foreign governments, and now the email scandal. This is not a standalone issue for Hillary Clinton, but built into, I believe, a long-term question of, is she a trustworthy person?
But it would seem as if no one on the left, at least publicly, is coming out saying that this bothers us. And now, of course, you mentioned donations. We have this report from CBS News saying that a Chinese company that has connections to the Chinese government pledged $2 million to the Clinton Foundation in 2013. Yet it still seems, again, Hadley Heath, that this isn't shaking that legacy one little bit.
Well, I think the reason is because on the left, there's not a lot of candidates in the fields that might run for 2016 for the Democratic nomination. I believe, unfortunately, the left has too many eggs in the Hillary basket. And if there were other serious contenders or people that, members of the Democratic Party felt they could support and felt would be as electable as Hillary Clinton, then they might be more critical. But because she is the leading face right now, I believe, of the Democratic Party with regard to 2016, they feel like they can't be publicly critical.
David, inside the Beltway, do you think there's part of that arrogance here that everybody talks about with the Clintons, and maybe even at this point Hillary and or some of her people have gone back to the folks who have backed them and gone back to some of the donors and said, wait a minute, before you start getting on the bandwagon here, before you start hammering us, just remember, it's either us or you've got Elizabeth Warren or you've got Webb or you've got O'Malley sitting there. You don't have anybody but us. Do you think that that possibly could just be part of the whole strategy here, that they'll come right out and say that to them?
Well, I don't think they need to say it. Everybody knows, as Hadley said, that they don't have anybody else, and that's why they're circling the wagons. I mean, privately, Democrats are annoyed. And let's not forget, Hillary Clinton doesn't have her husband's charm. She is not the campaigner that her husband was, and in a sense still is. And the Democratic Party, though, understands that they don't really have any other candidate that's running, that's going to run. They don't have a deep bench. And that's why everybody is protecting the Clintons. But I do think it's important to note that this issue eventually will go away. We have so many news cycles every day. I don't think a year from now we're going to be talking about this to the length that we are now. But why it's potentially dangerous to Clinton's presidential aspirations is because her big selling point, the thing that makes her a potentially really good candidate, beyond the fact that she'd be the first woman and the fact that she's a Clinton and all of that, is that she comes to the job with a lot of competency. I mean, the thing about Hillary Clinton is she knows what she's doing. She's smart. She's competent. It goes back to the whole 3 a.m. phone call ad back in 2008. But if you have this issue with the server and the security of her emails, it gives the Republican nominee, whoever it's going to be, a real in to attack that and tear it down and say, and actually, she's not that bright, or she's not that competent. She's not somebody you necessarily want as commander-in-chief, and that's, the potential for lasting damage here.
Hadley Heath, 30 seconds, and then we take a break. Do you consider Hillary Clinton competent?
I believe she's competent to the point of being able to maneuver around some of these government rules. I think, David maybe says transparency isn't the main issue here. It may not be the main issue, but it certainly is an issue, and trustworthiness is the main thing that's in question now.
All right, well, we'll have to talk about trustworthiness when we come back, but also I want to touch a little bit further on some of these alternatives, because quite frankly, when you start digging into the bench on the Democratic side, it gets to be almost entertaining to watch who might be there. Hang tight, everybody. We'll be right back to you. Now, if there's one adage that still seeps through about the Clintons and so many others in political life, it's a simple one. Go ahead, take your best shot. We're bulletproof and you can't touch us. So we'll add a few more Beltway doings to the mix, talk about all this and more when MidPoint continues. Get back to it, joined by the senior congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner, David Drucker, and the senior policy analyst for the Independent Women's Forum, Hadley Heath Manning. Hadley Heath, I'm going to start with you on this one. I just want to get back to this whole Clinton Foundation thing for just a moment here. We talk about the CBS News investigation here that finds $2 million to the foundation from a company that has connections to the Chinese government. In the Washington Free Beacon, there's millions of dollars from a former deputy prime minister of Lebanon known for defending Hezbollah that has gone to the Clinton Foundation. Why are we spending so much time on the emails when in essence it would seem to so many people that it's the foundation and the money? If you want to talk about a smoking gun, that would seem to be the thing that really will be the attack.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, these scandals are sort of starting to form some kind of pattern that I believe for many Americans and American voters especially will call into question whether, first of all, Hillary's a trustworthy person, and also where her allegiances are. Is she really someone who's going to do the best thing for Americans, for her constituents, if she were elected to a national office? And so I believe this is part of a pattern that's going to become more and more troubling for American voters, and is going to make for a lot of Republican ad fodder as they attack Hillary in the next cycle.
David, if indeed this is a pattern now, why are we not focusing more on it? Because it would seem to me, the journalists, this is actual red meat here if you look at it.
Yeah, and I think the press was focused a lot on this until the email scandal broke. I think the reason that the email scandal has superseded the foundation issue is because, number one, I think most voters kind of expect their politicians to be a little bit shady, and so pay to play, and maybe they were taking money they shouldn't have. Well, look, everybody does it. It was still getting a lot of focus in the press, but I think the email scandal is juicier because and easier in a sense for voters to really dig into, because you're dealing with whether or not actual rules and law were followed or broken, and you're dealing with issues of national security and whether or not Hillary Clinton was keeping her information secure from foreign hackers. And I just think that this is something that has much more lasting damage and is much more black and white in terms of trying to figure out whether she did something wrong or did something that was okay, versus something that may have been wrong, but hey, everybody does it, it's no big deal. And look, if you look at what Clinton's allies are trying to do with the email scandal, they're trying to say, well, everybody does it, because look at all of these governors and their emails either weren't transparent, or look what they were discussing. Of course, I don't tend to think that most voters care about the transportation plan of some random governor in some random state.
David, it sounds to me like all you're saying is we got to dumb it down for the American public.
What I'm saying is I think that it's easier for the American people to get interested in something that has to do with national security. The American people don't necessarily like shady politicians, but they think that everybody does it, and that's a difference.
There you go. Everybody is shady. I like that. We're going to have to put that on a pin, because that'll get us ready for the election cycle no matter what. Quick couple minutes that we have here. I'm going to start with you first of all on this one, David. If Hillary does not run, if that doesn't happen, I know that it's like a 1 of 1,000% chance, but is there anybody sitting on this bench? Jim Webb recently came out. Even he's talking about it now. Anybody who can capture that Democratic base, or are we just fooling ourselves?
Well, I think that it's unclear. Everybody talks about Elizabeth Warren, but she's untested, says she doesn't want to run. So she could capture the base, but what about the rest of the party? Jim Webb, his candidacy would be strong on national security, and he would run as a populist in a sense to the right of Hillary Clinton, if you think about it. And Martin O'Malley is a conventional liberal, very progressive, captures the imagination of no one. So right now, I just don't know who they got.
David, you actually, I think, just put a bunch of people to sleep. But then again, you gave us you gave us the truth, though. That's the big thing about it here.
This is my point. Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly. But I'm saying it really puts a lot of people to sleep when we look at this other bench here. Hadley Heath, I got about a minute left here. Is really that what it is? We need to worry about the somnambulistic side of things here on the Democratic bench. Just go to sleep with everybody else.
You know what would be really exciting would be if Joe Biden could run for president. I think he, as a conservative...
Now, would that be exciting or would that be real comedy relief? Come on.
Well, it would be comedy, but as a conservative, I'd like to encourage him right now to throw his hat in the ring. I think he'd be a great candidate. I'd love to see Joe Biden run for president for the sheer entertainment factor, of course. But, you know, this is trouble for the Democrats because, unfortunately, in the last couple of presidential elections, I believe it's really been more a matter of personality, and the left wants it to be that way. They want it to be a personality contest rather than a real, question of the agenda. Do you support the policy agenda of the right or the left? That should be the question before American voters, but instead we've had these personality contests in the last couple of electoral cycles, and I'd like to see it get back to the issues, boring or not.
I got about 20 seconds left. David, I heard you chuckle when Hadley Heath talked about Joe Biden being in here for the entertainment value.
I forgot about him. I forgot about the sitting vice president who probably would step in if it wasn't Hillary, but that just tells you kind of where things are at.
I was just going to say, what does it tell you when the sitting vice president immediately goes right out of our heads because we don't even think about it, but I can just see every late night writer right now is just pining for Joe Biden to get in this race. They would love every second of that. I really believe it too. David Drucker, Hadley Heath Manning, thanks so much for joining us, both of you. Have a great Monday. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
A lot.
All right, take care. ISIS is learning what it's like